You're listening to ADHD Support Talk. ADHD Support Talk is brought to you by ADDclasses.com. Visit www.addclasses.com to sign up for helpful online events and resources today. Welcome. I'm Lynne Edris, your co host. And as always, I'm here to help you overcome overwhelm, beat procrastination, and create more time and energy for the things that matter most to you. In case this is the first time we're meeting, I'm a veteran ADHD and productivity coach. So, for more than 18 years now, I've helped professionals and entrepreneurs from all over the world learn to take control of their time and do what matters more easily and consistently so that they have more time, energy, and more money for what matters most to them. And I really do get the struggle, guys. I'm a woman with ADHD myself, and I've lived in that constant state of chaos and overwhelm and underperformance that we all know far too well to come out the other side, so to speak, to live a life of more success and fulfillment than I once dreamed was possible for me. And that's what I'm most passionate about, helping you create your own life of success, freedom, and fulfillment in your own way so that you can start firing on all cylinders in all areas of your life. Because I know that's what you're capable of, and I know that's what's possible for you with the right support and the right approach. You can learn more about me and the programs and services I offer at www.coachingadvantages.com. So today I want to talk about something that is at the heart of so many of our struggles with ADHD, and that's dopamine, and more specifically, how differences in dopamine processing affect us, why so many of the strategies we use to manage ADHD only seem to work in the short term, and what we can do about it. We'll also dive into some of the common strategies people try to help boost dopamine, things like the dopamine menu, body doubling, and Pomodoro techniques, and more. They're all useful tools, but here's the thing. While they can give us a little boost, they don't really get to the core of the issue. So let's dig into what's really going on here and why the deeper work is what makes the difference. Now, I want to make sure you understand that I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on TV, so I'm giving you my quick layman's overview here, okay? So please be sure to consult with a medical professional if you have questions or concerns, okay? But let's start with the basics. If you're familiar with ADHD, you probably know that it's not about attention or hyperactivity alone, right? It's about how our brains manage brain chemicals. These neurotransmitters play a key role in our brain's ability to stay focused, to regulate ourselves, feel motivated, and follow through on what matters, right? But in a nutshell, the ADHD brain doesn't process them as efficiently and as effectively as others' brains do. So, for starters, dopamine and norepinephrine are the most often associated with ADHD, but some research suggests that serotonin, which influences mood and impulsivity, may also play a role. Lower serotonin levels can contribute to emotional dysregulation, and that's something that's often seen in those of us with ADHD. Another neurotransmitter that's processed differently in brains of individuals with ADHD is norepinephrine. In a nutshell, norepinephrine is involved in arousal and alertness, decision making, and again, the regulation of attention. It also plays a key role in maintaining focus and organizing thoughts and actions. So, deficiencies and differences in norepinephrine processing contribute to distractibility, difficulty in maintaining sustained attention, issues with executive functions like planning, organizing, and task completion. Norepinephrine also interacts with dopamine, meaning that disruptions in norepinephrine can further impact dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter that's responsible for feelings of motivation and reward. Okay. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter I want to talk about now because it's the one that's probably the most talked about when it comes to ADHD. Dr. Nora Volkov's research on the impact of dopamine on the brain eventually led to the discovery of the connection between ADHD and dopamine. And that dates back to the late 80s or early 1990s. And we're learning more and more about it all the time. We know, again, that dopamine is the neurotransmitter that's responsible for feelings of motivation and reward. We know that deficiencies in dopamine processing, the kind that are found in those of us with ADHD, can lead to difficulty, again, with lack of motivation, seeking out more immediate rewards, which can manifest in impulsivity or distractibility. These lower dopamine levels can make it harder for people with ADHD to experience satisfaction or pleasure or reward from completing tasks, especially if rewards are delayed or the thing that you're doing isn't motivating intrinsically or isn't something that is motivating on its own. So I want you to think of dopamine as one of the kinds of fuel that get your brain's engine running. When it's flowing well, right? When the dopamine is flowing, when all your neurotransmitters are flowing, but especially when dopamine is flowing, you feel motivated, you feel interested, and you feel rewarded when you work on and finish a task. But when dopamine is low, the tasks in front of you can feel like climbing a mountain or sludging through quicksand, right? You just can't get started. You can't stay on it. And it feels just hard, slow, and painful. And that's where a lot of us struggle, right? Now, I want to talk about what we can do about it. We often reach for strategies to give us a quick boost, and there are lots of ways to do that. You've probably heard of some of these, or maybe you've tried them yourself. Things like creating a dopamine menu, or using body doubling, or using a Pomodoro technique. These are great tools and can be really effective for short-term motivation and short-term focus, but they don't solve the underlying challenge of how consistently we need to get things done, especially when that natural dopamine isn't there. So I want to talk a little bit more about these strategies, why they work, at least why they work for a little while. First up is the dopamine menu. If you're not familiar with it, a dopamine menu is basically a list of activities that give you a little boost, a little hit of dopamine. These are quick, enjoyable things, again, that give you a boost. Things like going for a walk, listening to your favorite kinds of music, having a snack, doing a short creative activity or something else that you enjoy or that you're interested in. The idea is to have a go-to list, a menu, so to speak, of things that you can do when you're feeling stuck to give you that little burst of motivation. And yes, it can work. If you're having trouble getting started, sometimes doing something small, something enjoyable gives you enough of a mental shift to get you moving on the quote harder. I always use the word harder with my quotey fingers to indicate something that's difficult for us, right? It doesn't need to be hard in terms of skills or intellect or knowledge or ability, but it feels hard, right? So that's what I'm talking about when I say something harder. But here's the thing, that boost is temporary. The dopamine hit is short-lived, and then you're back to where you started. So you've kind of taken the edge off, so to speak, but the real challenge, getting the important stuff done regularly on your own, is still there. Another popular strategy is body doubling. I love this one because it taps into something we're all wired for: social accountability. So body doubling is when you work alongside someone else, either in person or virtually, to keep yourself on task. You're not working together on the same thing, but you're working in each other's presence, again, in person or virtually. You can do this in a coffee shop. You can do it in an online co-working session. There are in-person co-working spaces where you can work with someone else. You can do it in a public library, right? It doesn't matter, again, if they're doing something completely unrelated, like reading or working on their own stuff. The simple act of having someone there can be helpful with focus. For many of us, just having that presence, that gentle social pressure, that gentle awareness that someone else is there, again, either in person or virtually, is enough to get us to start working and to stay engaged. But again, it's one of those strategies that can work in the moment. But what happens when there's no one to co-work with? What happens when you don't have a body double? We can't always rely on external motivation to keep us going, right? So another popular method is the Pomodoro techniques. This is where you set a timer for a burst of focused work, and it can be any interval you want: 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 25 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever, followed by a short break. So it's a great way to create a sense of urgency right? And to give you that external stimulation that can be really helpful for dopamine and for keeping you focused. So you only have a limited amount of time to work, and that structure helps create that boost, right? Plus, the break is the reward, which keeps you coming back for the next session. Again, this works because it provides that short-term structure and reward, but it still relies on that initial motivation to start the timer. And if you're having a particularly rough day, even that can feel really hard or impossible. And then, of course, there's always the challenge with remembering to remember to use the strategy, remembering to set the timer when you really need it, right? Plus, the bigger piece of the puzzle, again, with any superficial strategy or tip, is that it removes what's called your locus of control. Now, don't get me wrong, all of these strategies have their place, right? They can be important tools to have in your toolbox. They can absolutely help in the moment. And I often recommend them to my clients as part of a larger group of tools in your toolbox. But the key is understanding that they're just that, they're tools. They help us bridge the gap temporarily, but they're not a solution to the deeper challenge that so many of us face with ADHD, which is how do we work through tasks and responsibilities when we're not feeling motivated, inspired, or engaged? So, I want to take a moment to talk about something really important here. Again, locus of control. When we rely on strategies like body doubling or timers to get things done, we're reinforcing what's called an external locus of control, meaning we're depending on something outside of us. We're depending on something or someone else to help us get moving and stay on track. Again, while that can help in the short term, it doesn't build that deep sense of agency and self direction that we really crave. That's really important to us feeling fulfilled and successful. When external locus of control is that feeling that many of us know far too well, especially if you have ADHD, that feeling like something outside us has to make like the moon and the stars and the planets align perfectly for us to be able to do certain kinds of things. The truth is, the most gratifying, the most fulfilling, and sustainable way to feel productive is by cultivating an internal locus of control. An internal locus of control is where you are in the driver's seat and you're able to take action without needing something outside of you to help you do it. There's nothing wrong with needing help once in a while, but an internal locus of control is that fundamental belief, that knowledge that you are in the driver's seat, that you are driving the bus of your life and your productivity. When you build the skills to follow through on what matters, even when motivation isn't there, that's when you start to feel real satisfaction, real fulfillment, and real success. And that's what leads to greater confidence and a stronger sense of capability. That feeling of agency, of knowing you can do what you need to do without waiting for someone or something else's help, is really powerful. It's something I work on with my clients in my Get It Done program, helping them to shift their thinking and their behaviors so they can reinforce that internal locus of control. And that's where the real transformation happens. Over time, you learn to rely on yourself, to know deep down that you are the one who determines when and how you take action and when and how you're successful. And that leads to long-term success and fulfillment, the kind that we really want. So here's the truth. Learning to work with ADHD means understanding that motivation isn't always going to be there. Dopamine isn't always going to show up when we need it. And we need to learn how to push through that discomfort, how to take action in ways that work for us, even when we don't feel like it. We need to learn to change the beliefs and the thinking patterns we've created over all of these years and decades that tell us that we can't do something when we don't feel a certain way. That's where the real work comes in. The work I do with my clients focuses on addressing the thinking patterns and behaviors that hold us back from being consistent, and then helping them develop the tools and the strategies and the systems that support the life that they want for themselves with that thinking and those beliefs working on their behalf also. It's about recognizing the automatic thoughts and patterns that lead us into procrastination or avoidance. Things like, I'll do it later, or I need to be in the right mood to get started, or I need to feel a certain way to do something. These are thoughts that keep us stuck in a cycle of waiting for motivation. But when we learn how to shift those thoughts, how to create habits and routines that don't rely on waiting for dopamine, don't rely on motivation, don't rely on us feeling a certain way, that's where real progress happens. And one of the first steps I work on with my clients is noticing those patterns of thinking. So when you feel stuck, ask yourself, what's the thought that's holding me back right now? Maybe the thing I need to do feels too big, or I'm worried about not doing it perfectly, right? Once you can name the thought, once you can identify it and make the thought conscious, you can start to work on neutralizing it and taking a small step forward, even if you don't feel fully ready, right? Over time, as you start to build new habits, those small steps become easier. And you start to see them as having the value that they really do in creating momentum. You start to develop systems and routines and ways of working that support you when the dopamine isn't there. And those quick fixes become just a part of your broader strategy, your broader approach, your broader way of working, not the whole thing. And that's where the lasting change happens. So if you're finding that strategies like a dopamine menu or body doubling or anything else like that, timers, alarms, apps, whatever, work for a little while, but then you find yourself falling back into old patterns, I encourage you to look deeper at the thoughts and behaviors driving those cycles. That's the real key to moving forward, learning to take action even when motivation isn't there on its own. I want to thank you for joining me today on ADHD Support Talk. I hope this gave you some insight into why those dopamine differences can be such a challenge and how some of these strategies might help you in the short term. But remember, the real transformation comes from understanding and addressing those deeper patterns of our thinking and those deeper beliefs that we create over time. If you want more support or if you're ready to work through these challenges in a more consistent way, I'd love to help you with that in the work I do with my clients. As always, if you found this helpful, please subscribe, share the episode with someone who might benefit from it, and leave a review if you enjoyed it or found it helpful so that more people can find our show and get the support they need to live well with ADHD. And please join us in the ADHD Support Talk Facebook group to discuss, share thoughts and ideas, ask questions, and connect with us. We'd love to see you there. But I'll see you next time on ADHD Support Talk. As always, I appreciate your attention and thank you for spending it with me. Again, I'm Lynne Edris. You can learn more about me and the programs and services I offer at www.coachingadvantages.com. Take care.